Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Taos County Board of Commissioners, and I'd like to start it out with a moment of silent prayer. I'd like to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation. Having no public comments tonight, move on to number 4 on the agenda. Recognition. Commissioners have any recognitions? All right, next up would be the approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have one item that I'd like to add to the agenda. I'd like to add number 10, letter of support for Project Seed.
I have an item that I would like to add. I have a question for the county attorney tonight involving the appointment of the position of the board. So,
Okay. So would you like to put that as number 8 under discussion item?
that'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, the discussion about the agenda is there. Second, got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Signify with aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Going to number 6, the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any questions or comments involving that? Approved. A motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to discussion items. Pelham Industrial Park. Restricted covenants. Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, you have in your agenda packet the restrictions and covenants for the Pelham Industrial Park. I do not believe it's important that you decide anything about these tonight. However, I do believe it's important you're aware they exist. And if they need to be amended in any way, that there's a process outlined in the document for doing so. And that process requires a meeting of all the property owners of the industrial park. So I'll just point out to you really quickly, Article 3 indicates all the permitted uses. Article 4 outlines all the prohibited uses. Article 5 of the document outlines the development standards, such as setbacks, landscaping, lighting, signage, plan approval, site size, maintenance, trash collection, etc. And then Article 6 outlines the association membership. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the document. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
When I was reading through it, who is the association? Is that us and the one landowner?
So it's the Board of Commissioners and there's, the way I understand it, there's 3 separate entities that are a motorsports company. There's and 2 different warehousing complexes there that are 2 different warehouses there that would all be memberships of the association.
Well, when it said about voting, it said Castle County had 3 votes, but it said you have a vote for, I think, 1 vote for each acre that you own.
Mhm.
So do we follow that, or we only have 3?
No, I think you have 3 votes per acre.
Okay. I didn't see anywhere in there where it couldn't be changed.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think there are there's some case law that deals with changing amendments after lots have already been sold. I think we would need to work closely with the landowners that are already there and just make sure that they were okay with doing that. But I do believe that you're correct in that just from a voting standpoint, the county retains enough votes to change whatever needs to be changed.
I saw you pop up. Did you have?
Yeah, thank you for that. So there is a process outlined in the document for amending the covenants. I'll note that these are old. These have some age on them. Looks like they date from 2002. There's been a number of changes to the way that plan unit developments operate and are governed since then. So as the county manager said, as the commissioners think about potentially amending the covenants, perhaps expanding, changing some of the permitted uses, we would just need to go through the process. And there's a recent case law that talks about the need to get consent from all owners when you substantively amend certain provisions of covenants. So we just need to be mindful of that. I don't anticipate that that you'd have any issues out here, but it is a process. If you're ready to when and if you're ready to start the amendment, it'll take a bit of time.
Any other questions or comments about the restricted covenant?
Do we want to move him forward with some more investigating at this point? Maybe give us some kind of proposal.
I'm happy to do. I'm happy to look further into the changes that would be required to necessitate moving forward with amending the covenants for the types of businesses that you discussed. Yes.
Now, one thing that's actually prohibited, private residences or businesses that would create any of these 8 or 10 things listed. Am I correct?
Well, I think there's some language in the document that talks about manufacturing, that it needs to be from a manufacturing or.
I know what he was saying. I was kind of going that way, but the more I read it, the more it didn't actually say you could say put a motel or a restaurant.
But you say you could.
It said what you could. That was the problem.
Okay. Right.
It wasn't clear.
That's not listed under permitted uses, correct?
Right.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, the way the covenant's set up in Article 4, there's a very minimal number of prohibited uses, and you've mentioned the categories. Residential uses are permitted, and then noxious uses, I'll call them, those uses that create a disturbance or a nuisance, dust, odor, that sort of thing. And then there's a catch-all in Section 3 that allows any other uses, even though they're not enumerated as permitted uses, that are acceptable to the association. So, there's a pretty wide, latitude for the association to approve various uses. And so, depending on exactly what uses you have in mind for this property, you may or may not need to make substantive amendments to the covenants, although you might want to for other reasons, just because they are old. But
There was one more thing, and somebody helped me remember, but we were going to check on what the water and sewer, what kind of deal we had, I guess, with Danville.
Yeah, so with the research we've done so far, what I can see in the original document is that we have 100,000 gallons for water, 100,000 gallons for sewer a day. There was some effort later on to make that 500,000 gallons per day in 2015. And we have contracts that were drawn up between the city of Danville and the county. To date, I can't find record of those contracts being approved. I have a copy of the contract. So we're still trying to find some record of those contracts being approved by the board. And when we do so, I'll let you know. But right as it stands right now, I know it's at least 100,000 gallons a day. And current usage doesn't meet 100,000 gallons a month.
100,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to board.
I think it'd be a good idea if we let Mr. Miller look into making some changes. As far as hotel, motel, restaurant, whatever, what would need to be changed in this so that we wouldn't jump our toe, so to speak. And some business that are interested in.
From an industrial standpoint, 100,000 gallons a day, what type industries would exceed that? I mean.
Well, it's an industrial complex. It's not. To be honest with you, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what would use 100,000 gallons a day, but the combined usage would have to be 100,000 gallons a day. So if you had a restaurant and a hotel, I think 100,000 gallons is still more than sufficient. But if you had a large, maybe metal fabrication shop that needed to cool metals and used water to do it, maybe that's the way, but I don't think most of the time you used some type of oil or lubricant to heat treat metals. But I don't have a good answer for you.
So with all that said, it's board comfortable with Commissioner Yarbrough's suggestion that Mr. Miller go back and dig into the situation.
I do one thing I would say, when it came to the water and the sewer, like you said, it's 100,000 combined for everybody. It may not be a bad idea to see if we would be able to get any more water if we did need it. If you put a hotel and motel, hotel and restaurant there, and the water capacity, you met it, but then you've got land still left that you can't do nothing with because you're not able to get water so long.
Yeah, well, like I said, the agreement that we were working on in 2015 was 500,000 gallons combined. So that would have been about 250,000 gallons of water and wastewater, both each per day.
Okay.
So, but I haven't spoken to the county attorney about that yet. He may have a little bit more information. I'll get with him later on in the week and we'll figure that out. I know clerk to the boards look for the documents, the signed documents. She's looked for it in the agenda packets, and we've not been able to find it yet where it was approved, but we'll keep looking.
Any more comments? Pleasure, board.
Is if it gets down, Mr. Furr, if it gets down to us having to change it, if it's a very simple process, would we be better off maybe just leave it and then see what comes to us? I mean, if something really lucrative in the industrial side came to us at all of a sudden that we would never dream of, and then we had switched it over. But if it was where it was hanging out there that we could change it reasonably easy, would we be better off to maybe leave it just to see what comes?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some value in the wait and see approach. And so, yeah, and I wouldn't imagine that any change the manager would recommend would make the current uses or anything similar, convert those to prohibited uses, right? So we certainly wouldn't want to close the door to any potential future user of the park, even if you decided to perhaps expand explicitly some of the uses. So yes, and perhaps we'll decide that there's enough flexibility in the document as is that we wait and see what comes. That certainly could be the outcome of the review.
Which was it, Tim?
Tim,
I'm sorry.
we have a proposal by Commissioner Yarborough and Mr. Miller do further investigation into the restricted covenant. What's the pleasure of the board, y'all? I'm going that direction. Discussion on.
Worth looking into.
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Moving on to the next item then. Everyone realizes that the appointment to the board has now been passed to the clerk of court because we were deadlocked. But Mr. Farrell, NC General Statute 128-7.2, you familiar with that statute?
I am. I looked at it in conjunction with the current issue.
Could you give me your interpretation of what that law means?
Yeah, I believe that law is designed to place some limits around who can receive an appointment to a vacant office. And I'm happy to read it.
That would be good, especially, I tell you, read the whole thing and then I'll pick out the part that I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on.
Sure. So this is pulling out from 153A-22D. I'm sorry, 128.7-7.2. No persons eligible for appointment to fill a vacancy in any elective office, whether state or local, unless that person would have been qualified to vote as an elector for that office if an election were to be held on the date of the appointment. This section is intended to implement the provisions of Section 8, Article 6 of the Constitution.
Okay, so specifically, I'm asking you as the attorney, because I don't want to get into a situation like this in the future. If we have another vacancy, no person is eligible for appointment to fill a vacancy in any elective office, whether state or local, unless that person would have been qualified to vote as an elector for that office if an election were held on the date of appointment. Mr. Foster would not qualify under that law to be appointed to that position.
Well, if there was an election held, right, for that district based on the new district boundaries today, and he lives outside those district boundaries, he would not be eligible.
So how did we wind up with a 3-3 deadlock? Ms. Pearl, I'm kind of wondering why you didn't point that out a little harder during our deliberation.
Well, it's been there. To me, that's not necessarily controlling. That's why. That statute doesn't change the opinion that I provided to the board about appointment from the old district or the new district. I'm certainly aware what that statute says, but it doesn't change the opinion that I have about the appointment.
The line that you've got to be an elector in that district to be appointed to that office how can anybody see that as anything but a disqualifier for somebody that doesn't live in the district?
I
That would be
think,
like saying somebody that lives in Japan could vote in an American election. That's not the case unless they had dual citizenship.
I just disagree with the interpretation. Now, look, different lawyers can disagree about the you have to read that statute in connection with the appointment statutes as well. It can't be read in a vacuum, in my view. But that statute is there, and it does lead to some of the ambiguity about the current question. And as I've said, I can't point to anything in case law that says specifically this is the answer to the question that the board has raised about whether you appoint from the old district or the new district. I think it is a matter of interpretation when you read all of the relevant statutory materials that we have available on this question, when you read them together. And I came down with the same opinion that the election expert, the School of Government, came down with, which is that it logically makes sense to appoint from the old district. Now, would a court agree with me? I don't know. I have an opinion, and that's what you pay me for, and I've provided it. It could be wrong. It could be wrong. A court could decide it differently. Another lawyer could have a different opinion on the question. But to me, it's not settled, and that statute doesn't answer the question definitively.
Well, I can tell you're an attorney because you've talked around it to where you've articulated your position as such a well-rounded avenue that anybody could hear what you've said and be confused. But when we get back to the nuts and bolts and the wording of this law, I wholeheartedly disagree with your opinion, and so do several other attorneys I have talked with. I think it is pretty clear, and I'll move on from it, but I don't agree with you at all.
And you don't have to agree with me, and I don't know what the clerk will ultimately do. I really don't. But to the extent that you end up disagreeing with his appointment, the board will have some options available to it to challenge that opinion. I don't know what the clerk will do, but you can consider whatever he does after he does it, and if you believe it's a flawed understanding of the law, whatever action comes, you'll have the options available to you.
That is the clerk of court's discretion now. This ball has been kicked in his court. It's out of our hands. Are there any other questions or comments involving this topic from any members of the board?
Mr. Pearl, any idea when or if we'll hear anything from the Attorney General?
No, I haven't heard any word on when or if we may hear back, other than to know that the package was delivered to their office last week.
There are no other comments. We will move on to action items. Number 8 is the EDC additional permanent voting seats. Mr. Miller.
Commissioners, the EDC has requested that we add a few additional voting members to the EDC. Those members are Piedmont Community College President, Agricultural Extension Director, Caswell Health Collaborative Director, and the Chamber of Commerce Director. These would be ex officio members. However, they would be able to vote. Milton and Yanceyville have already approved these positions, and I would recommend you approve these additional voting positions if it pleases the board tonight, and we'll bring back an amended resolution to the board at the next meeting for approval. And
Mr. Miller, just as you wrap up there, let me just mention to the board that the enabling legislation that gives counties and municipalities the authority to create the economic development commissions has a requirement that the commission shall consist of between 3 and 9 members. There are currently 9 members. So in order to add, if you will, dedicated seats, we'll have to reconfigure how the seats are appointed. Right now, it's 3-3-3. Each local government appoints 3. So we'll have to reconfigure that a little bit if you want to have designated seats for these additional voting members.
High school.
Yes.
What's the advantage to adding it? What's the advantage to adding these seats?
So those are members that regularly attend the EDC meetings now. Just gives additional community organizations a voice in the economic development process.
Did I hear you right, said the ex officio, all 3? Won't have any voting rights.
They will have voting rights. So ex officio really only means your appointment is because of the office that you hold, or because of the office you hold, you're appointed to that position as a result of one's status or position. So the appointee would not be, and I'm going to use PCC for an example, it would not be Pamela Senegal. It would be Piedmont Community College president. So they would have the ability to vote. That's what the EDC is requested.
And so they would actually be, they'd have member status just like the other members on the board. And so that's why the maximum number comes into play. You can only have 9 by statute. So.
Yeah, and based on county attorney's comments, maybe we need to relook this a little bit. Let me go back to the town of Milton, the EDC, and the town of Yanceyville, and discuss them a little bit further. Discuss this with them a little bit further, because I don't know that everybody's aware of that. So if we could just table this item till a further future date.
Sounds like that's the best course of action. Number 8 is going to be tabled. We'll move on to number 9. Great grant contract. Again, this is
So commissioners, in your agenda packet, you have a generic great grant 3-party agreement produced by the state NCDIT, along with Exhibit J. Exhibit J is an outline of how county matching funds will be paid to the internet service provider that won the bid for the contract. For Exhibit J, counties were given 4 options for payment of matching funds. You have additional information on your desk related to Exhibit J. So option 1 provides that the entire amount of matching funds be paid to the provider within 10 days of the execution of the contract. So option 2 provides that the entire amount be wired to the provider in full within 30 days after the county receives the final progress report from the construction period from NCDIT. Option 3 provides the funds will be provided to the provider in 2 equal payments, one 10 days after execution of the contract and one upon receipt of the progress report from NCDIT. Option 4 provides a kind of a pay-as-you-go approach for distributing the funds. The grantee would submit requests for reimbursement to NCDIT pursuant to the process set forth in the Great Grant Agreements and Exhibits. Upon approval of each payment requested by NCDIT, NCDIT would send a copy of that payment request to the county. The county would then wire whatever percentage of the amount that was approved by NCDIT to the grantee within 10 days of receipt of the payment request. This percentage would represent the county's pro rata share of the total project cost. So I know that's a lot. First, I would recommend to the board option 2 for the Exhibit J. Option 2 provides the entire amount be wired to the provider in full within 30 days after the county receives the final progress report for the construction period from NCDIT. And my recommendation is based on 2 points. First, ISPs have been awarded 2 great grants in previous years that were never built. This gives me some pause to recommend to any other payment schedule than the one I'm recommending. Secondly, the amount obligated by Caswell is such a small part of the overall project amount. It should not hinder the progress of the project to wait until completion to disperse the funding. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the 4 different exhibits.
Is the NCDIT a government agency that's gonna say, yes, their contract's been completely finished and closed out?
Yes.
So what you're saying is, don't pay them anything until the job completed.
That's correct.
The 250,000. What's the total project price? 4 million?
8 million.
8.
So they were awarded 4 million and they're required to come up with a 50% match. So the total project cost would be $8 million.
Our report was how much?
250,000. Which is 1/32 of the total project cost.
This is ARPA money.
That's correct.
Any more discussion? Any questions on what's been presented thus far? Direction y'all go in as far as which option you want to select.
That's probably, I feel like, yeah, I'm going by a whole lot about what you say, but that sounds like the safest. I mean,
So just to give you a little history on it, we've had two of these contracts awarded before, one to Open Broadband. Open Broadband took the full 2 years before they relinquished the grant back to the state. It was then rebid and awarded to River Street Communications. River Street, then when they found out about Spectrum coming into the county, they gave the grant back to the state too. No money ever changed hands between any of them. But basically what Open Broadband and to some degree what River Street did was held up our process for moving broadband forward for that many years. So this is a grant that we as a county have very little control over. It's very little control over. It's between the state and the broadband internet service provider. So like I said, you know, if we give them $250,000 up front, and then, you know, they hold it for 2 years, there's a 2-year build out window. They hold it for 2 years, they may give it back if they don't build everything out. And there's a chance that they're only going to build out 80% of it. If they build out 80% of it, you know, I'm not sure that we would get a portion of that funding back.
If we paid it up front, you're saying.
Right. So what I would like to see in a completion report from NCDIT is an amount of the project that is completely finished. And they say we're not doing anymore. So if that's 80%, then we pay them 80% of the $250,000. If it's 95%, then we pay them 95%. But I'm not really a big fan of providing them with all the money up front or a portion of the money up front, because I don't know how much of the project they're actually going to complete.
There wasn't anything in the initial contract of payments had to be paid at certain times or anything like that.
No, so this is the initial contract. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we go with option 2. We contribute out the county's $250,000 once the project is completed.
Have a motion, do we have a second? All those, we'll do it by roll call voting. Mr. Rhodes? Mr. McVeigh? Mr. Chalker, and myself, it's unanimous.
So commissioners, I would also, along with this, I would ask the board to grant me to approve the contract, but to grant me the authority to sign the contract on or after April 4th, when it comes to the county for signing from DIT. You can see in this sheet. And if you don't want to do that, we can definitely wait till after the 4th. It's just going to show up on your agenda again after the 4th. But on this paper that should be laying at your desk, we need to send the unsigned copy of the Exhibit J, whichever option we choose, to NCDIT. They're going to package it up, put all the wording in it, or all of the Caswell County instead of blank spaces. And they're going to send that out to the county and to the ISPs on April 4th. And May 4th, they on or before May 4th, they want the signed documents back to NCDIT.
I remember reading something about the person that signs that contract has to sign something else. They're the only person that can do it. Am I correct? There was some wording in there about that.
To be honest with you, I don't remember that. It doesn't mean it's not in there.
Yeah.
But if you're more comfortable with the chairman signing it, I'm happy to do that as well. I just want to make sure that whomever needs to be signing it is signing it, and they have the authority to do so.
Brian, I would suggest we just bring this back to the board once the contract's finalized. There's a chance maybe the vendor would, perhaps try to negotiate some changes with the state, although these are template forms. I don't want to waste the board's time by seeing it again, but they may benefit from having the entire package in front of them. That's an alternative way to do it versus authorizing the contracts now and giving the manager the authority to sign.
And that's perfectly fine with me.
Let's do it. I'll make a motion to do that.
Okay.
Wait on the signature for it.
We have a motion to wait and have it represented to the board after the rest of the information is added. I have a second for that. Second. Got a motion and a second. Roll call voting. Start on this side, Mr. Pope.
Yes.
Mr. Yarborough. Unanimous, all right. We'll move on to the next item, the letter of support, Mr. Miller.
So commissioners, I received an email this morning from Piedmont Community College asking for a letter of support from the board for Project Seed. PCC has been made aware of a funding opportunity from Congresswoman Kathy Manning's office that could total $2,186,000. The project has already received enough funding to complete phase 1 of the project. Project Seed is supported by NC State Cooperative Extension, Piedmont Progressive Farmers Group, North Carolina A&T, and many other organizations. So you have a copy of the letter in front of you. I would ask that the board approve the letter of support. And here again, it's strictly a letter of support. It doesn't tie the county to do anything or obligate the county to do anything. It's purely a letter of support.
I feel like that's an action that we should wholeheartedly endorse. As such, I'd like to make a motion for it to be approved. Motion in a second. Roll call voting. Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Yarborough. Aye. Mr. Rhodes. And I'm unanimous. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, county manager updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just point out that our county attorney will be here on March 28th for a watershed appeals board hearing. That begins at 1:00 p.m. If any commissioner would like to schedule a time to meet with the county attorney before the hearing begins, please contact myself or Carla, and we'll schedule a time for you to meet with the county attorney before that hearing starts. I do want to point out several grant opportunities that we are pursuing. The Senior Center Expanded Services Grant through the Piedmont Triad Regional Council. It's they have a grant called Centers Without Walls approach. So what this would do would take some of the programming that occurs at the senior center and allow it to occur outside of the walls of the senior center, maybe at the Pelham Community Center or Southern Caswell Ruatan, or anywhere else in the county that programming may be needed or wanted that's just not directly at the senior center. So that grant is $80,000. I want to point out some grants for family services and domestic violence. We have a supportive housing American Rescue Plan grant, and that grant is $3 million. And it would be used for the acquisition and rehabilitation of non-congregate shelters through the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. There's another grant, the Rural Domestic Violence, Dating Violence, Sexual Assault, and Stalking Program. And it's through the Office on Violence Against Women. It's for between $100,000 and $950,000, rural domestic violence. And it would be used to continue and expand existing programming targeting rural communities. There's also a transitional housing assistant grant for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking solicitation. It's through the Office on Violence Against Women. It's for between $100,000 and $550,000. It's used for transitional housing. Funding is specific to provide housing support, rent, mortgages, deposits to survivors who can secure safe and secure housing. None of these grants require a county match. So there's no funding required from the county for us to apply for these grants and for us to receive these grants. I will point out that the Family Services is, for the most part, a grant-funded department. There are 2 grants that do require a county match that we apply for every year, and as part of the current budget. It's the FISPA grant and the Council for Women grant, which provides the majority of the funding for family services. So I just wanted to make you aware of those. We're going to move forward with applying for those unless there's a strong objection from the board. And when and if we receive those grant funds, they'll come back before the board for acceptance and approval before we actually accept the funding. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions? If there are none, we'll move on to commissioner comments. Any gentlemen have any comments this evening?
Question for the county manager.
Yes, sir.
The high note that the board passed, what, 2 years ago, something like that, 2020. If changes were to be made to any items in there, would that come from the planning board to this board, or does this board has to change?
Well, I think ideally they would come from the planning board and then come to this board.
Okay.
But I think that this board could direct the planning board to look at specific changes that needed to be made, and they could do that. This board is the appointing authority for the planning board, so I think that's appropriate if you want to do.
Well, the only reason I asked, I've had some citizens approach me about maybe some tweaking needs to be done to a few things in there. I'll be at the planning board meeting next week, the 28th, since it's a watershed review board. I'm guessing the planning board will have a regular meeting after that, so I'll discuss it with them and see if they want to tackle it, if they want this board to tackle it.
Okay.
Any other comments? We're moving on to announcements and upcoming events. April 3rd, 2023, commissioner meeting at 6:30 p.m. April the 7th, 2023, county offices will be closed for Good Friday. April 17th, 2023, commissioner meeting at 6:30 p.m. Is there any other business comments by the commissioner before we move to adjourn?
One thing, Mr. Chairman, and I thank everybody received the email. The board has been invited to meet with County Farm Bureau Board on the 18th. 7:30, I believe is right, Laura. So. And for some reason, they asked me to speak. I hadn't quite figured that one out. You are all invited, and it would be nice if you would call up the office and let the receptionist know if you can go. Or Bureau office up the street here.
So commissioners, I'll just say, if you plan on attending that meeting, please let our clerk know. If 4 or more of you attend, we'll have to notice that as a public meeting. So we just don't want to get out of bounds there. So just let the clerk know if you plan to attend. Yes.
So nothing further. We have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? We set an adjournment.